such a time as this.
And welcome back to For Such a Time as This, the place where there is no such thing as a silent witness. I want to encourage you, as always, to go to our webpage, for such a time as this .today, for such a time as this .today. There you can always be caught up on our newest material. As we can no longer say things that YouTube does not approve of, we will go to our webpage and then you can get all of our information there. Well, I have a special guest today. He's been so kind. We met at the Southern Baptist Convention, and we have talked since then on the phone, and it is my pleasure to introduce to For Such a Time as This, the first time, hopefully not the last, Bob Smietana. He's a longtime religious writer for the Religious News Service. Thank you, Bob, for being with us.
I'm so glad to be here.
Good. So we just posted the article on our Facebook page. The SBC President Ed Litton announces task force to oversee Executive Committee abuse review. And here, Bob, who wrote the article, is going to help us understand more in depth. I had some questions after reading the article, but I'm going to let Bob give us. You want to give the historical context to what's going on in the SBC as it pertains to the larger religious world.
Sure. Well, so thank you so much for having me on. So, as you know, since the early 2000s, religious groups and churches in the U.S. have been dealing with this question of abuse. It really starts in the early 2000s in Boston with the Boston Globe writing about abuse by priests, where priests were kind of moved from church to church and covered up. And it's every denomination or faith group in the U.S. has had to deal with this. And so in the Southern Baptist Convention, there's been some challenges, in large part because of the way the convention is set up. Unlike other denominations, there's no national credentialing for pastors, so the national office doesn't credential pastors or license them, and each church can decide who can be a leader in the church and track their own leaders.
Because technically it's a convention, not a denomination, Southern Baptist.
Yes, it's a convention, not a denomination.
Correct.
So it has joint entities, but it's a bottom up religious institution versus a top down.
Correct.
And so that's been a challenge. So in some cases, SBC leaders have said this is not a problem in our churches. And so in other cases, they said it's a problem. You should call the police. And sexual abuse is terrible, but we can't on a national basis do anything. So that's kind of there's been back and forth about that. In the early, like around 2008 or 2009, there were calls to do a database of pastors who abuse, and that was turned down by the convention leadership. And so that's kind of the background of this. And so in 2019, the Houston Chronicle basically did an investigation looking for abuse cases at Southern Baptist churches and found several hundred of them, I think 700 over like a 20-year period. And these are only cases where there had actually been conviction. So these are not, there's more abuse, but because most abuse cases, or many abuse cases, don't end up in conviction. And they found a number of churches that had either mishandled abuse claims by, or some that actually, where there were sex offenders or so in February 2019, there's a big article called Abuse of Faith in the Houston Chronicle. And then right after that, at the executive committee meeting in Nashville, former President J.D. Greer got up and said, look, this is a problem for us. And here are 10 churches that are in this report that we think should be looked into because they have mishandled abuse or they have abusers on staff. So that sort of kicked things off. So for a little context, so that happened. There were 10 churches, several of the churches, and that led actually to the executive committee and the convention to decide that a church could be basically removed from the convention if it mishandled sexual abuse. I'll give you one of the cases. One of the cases is a church in Georgia which had a music minister who had confessed to the pastor that he was an abuser and abused a young teen.
Bob, before you go any further,
Sure.
if J.D. Greer is saying it is a problem, why didn't they do anything at that point?
So that's what they did. Actually, so a number of things happened at that point. One, they set up a task force to look at how do we deal with this.
So J.D. Greer, because you know what, I'm glad you're telling me this because I don't know the specifics. So you're telling me J.D. Greer in 2019 set up a task force?
Yes, there's a task force to say how do we better deal with abuse, prevent it. It's called the Caring Well Task Force, and they got a number of pastors on that group. They had Rachel Denhollander was one of the people on that. Rachel is a lawyer, but she's basically known for I think she's Presbyterian, but she's known for helping take down Larry Nassar, who was an abusive gymnastic coach. That's been a very famous case.
Yes.
She was a lawyer, and she's one of the first people to come forward and say, and she's pretty much, her testimony helped convict him.
Okay.
So she's very well known and has been very active in this. So they put together, they have a whole program called Caring Well, which is on how to deal with abuse. They had a conference on this. They have a whole set of suggestions for churches. The executive committee also drafted some bylaw changes that would specifically name mishandling abuse as cause to be disfellowshipped from the SBC. So for an SBC, if you stay in by being in friendly cooperation. So if you mishandle abuse as a church, the convention can rule you out of friendly cooperation.
Okay, and all of that came out of the task force formed in 2019.
Yes. So all it came out of this is all in response to that 2019 report. So so a couple things. There was some resistance by the staff at the executive committee to those changes.
What specifically did they object to?
I think so. One of the staff members is very well known, Augie Bodo, who had long been involved in sex, kind of dealing with how the convention responded to abuse. My understanding is that he thought the problem was overstated and was concerned about the convention interfering with the operation of local churches.
They can't do that.
So I think
the convention has no power to do that.
So that was his concern, and so he had long been on the side of saying we can't have a national response. This is really a local response. There also been so let me tell you a couple more things. So in one of the cases, in 10 churches, several of the churches were investigated by or there was a review of those churches by what's called the Credentials Committee.
Okay.
So also they set up a Credentials Committee to look at if there's concern about a church, you send it to them. So a number of those churches were looked at. In one case, there's a church in Georgia where they had someone who was a confessed abuser on staff, and the church had said, well, he's confessed this and been forgiven, so we think it's fine for him to be the music minister.
Okay.
And actually some apparently staff from the executive committee and from the Georgia Baptist Convention apologized to the church because of Greer had criticized them.
Because Greer what? He did what?
Had criticized them and called them out.
Okay.
So now it does turn out that that staff person had been in a different church and that church was concerned and found about 10 other victims of abuse at their church.
10 other victims at that specific church.
Yeah. So the person who was the music minister at the one Georgia church had been in a different church called Rehoboth Baptist. So the folks at Rehoboth Baptist said, wait, this guy was at our church and there might have been a teacher. So they went looking to find out what happened. They did an investigation. And
Bob, before you go any further, was this guy a registered sex offender?
I don't know if he's a registered sex. I don't know if he's convicted or not.
Okay.
He was confessing. So the church was aware of his past. And he told the church that I did abuse someone and they were open about knowing about it.
And they still hired him.
They still hired him, yes, because they felt that because he had confessed and been forgiven and changed his life, that he was now good to be in ministry.
Now again, the saying, the devil's in the detail. How long ago are we speaking, and what exactly did he do? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
If we're talking about,
I'm
sorry.
Yeah, my understanding is that there was actual physical sexual abuse.
Oh goodness! How many years passed?
I think it's in the 80s. I can actually tell you in one second because we wrote about it.
That's okay. Okay.
Yeah, so it was very, and the church was aware of it and had said, well, and they did not know of other victims. Now that church, for its credit, has since said, oh wait, it has since looked back and said we did not handle this right and found that there were more victims and apologized for the way they handled it. More
victims from the one guy?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So talking about okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So that's the church where he was. He's no longer on staff at that church.
Okay.
So that was one. That's one case where I think the criticism has been of the executive committee. The executive committee moved too fast to say there's not a problem here.
Gotcha.
So instead of saying, okay, we need to really inquire, they talked to the church. The church said, this is how we handled it. And that case was that churches concerns about the church were they were not pursued.
Okay.
That makes sense.
I got you.
Okay.
And so go ahead.
So that's one of the cases. The other case is a little more complicated, but it's pretty well known. There was a professor at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary who used his position to start an abusive relationship with a student. The student had come from a very difficult home life, had a conversion, had come to seminary. He became a mentor to her, became basically a surrogate dad. And then after he became a surrogate dad and being close to her, began to coerce her into sexual conduct.
And this is documented.
This is documented, yes.
Got it.
And it went on for a very long time. It's a very
gotcha.
sad and kind of ugly situation. So
okay.
She eventually went to the seminary, and she went on to work at a different entity. But she went back to the seminary and to her church and said, "Look, this is going on. It's continued to go on. I need help getting out of this." And both the church and this happened in Louisville, but both the church and the seminary looked at the situation. Felt it was abusive because there's a lot of concern now about the abuse of power by pastors.
Sure, but this was a seminary professor.
States, seminary professor. In a number of states, it's illegal for a pastor or teacher or counselor to have a sexual relationship with someone they are in authority over.
Okay,
because they're using their spiritual office and authority to get personal gain.
Sure.
That makes sense.
Sure.
In a harmful way. So that story came out. He was fired, and she, the seminary was trying to be confidential, didn't publish her name. They said they got rid of this pastor. But what happened is the professor went and got another job at a mission organization.
Within the Southern Baptist Convention?
Not within the Southern Baptist Convention, but outside of it. And so she was concerned that he would, because people didn't know what happened, that they would, that he would continue, he could abuse other people.
Sure.
So she came forward, she went to Baptist Press and said, I'll tell you my story. I was abused by this pastor. This is an abusive situation. Here's what my church did. Here's what the seminary did. Well, the Baptist Press mishandled it and called it basically an affair, a morally inappropriate relationship. And so when they published an article that she ended up losing her job, it really became quite ugly because she was seen as an adulteress. It's a longer story than that, but that's just
no. I got you. And so, what does the?
Because I want to make sure this person doesn't become insane ministry.
Sure.
And handled well by Baptist Press, and they've apologized for it, but not for a very long time.
So here's my question then. What are they trying? The two that you just mentioned. Are they trying to lay this at the feet of the executive committee? And what? Yes or no?
Yes, I think that it is part of. So the third thing would be when So Russell Moore is one of the people involved in the kind of response to abuse, and I think he and some of the abuse survivors have said there was a pattern by the executive committee to either downplay these abuse allegations or mistreat abuse survivors. So that's the claim.
So
I think that's why we have.
So I get it with the Baptist Press calling it an adulterous affair and not bringing it up that it was a professor-student relationship. That is unfair. But what specifically are we saying that the executive committee was guilty in doing? That one, absolutely, I get it if that's the case. But go ahead.
Yeah. So there's that. There was the church where it felt like that they didn't pursue cases. Those are two of the biggest ones. I think behind the scenes, there was when that survivor came to the executive committee in Baptist Press and said, "Look, can we change this? This has been mishandled." There was pushback against that. Now that was all behind the scenes. So there's a lot of kind of insider baseball here. So that was all behind the scenes. So they have a big, in the fall of 2019, there was a big, what's called the Caring Well Convention that went on. That was, here's how we can here's how we can help people who are survivors of abuse. Here's how we can prevent abuse.
Yeah.
And Rachel Den-Hollander, who was one of the speakers there, she called out the executive committee and said, "Look, here's how you mishandled this case, and you've hurt the survivor, and you haven't made it right after months."
And this was early this year, that 2021?
That was in 2019. Oh,
2019. And what specifically? What's the specific charge? What's the specific charge?
First charge is that because the Baptist Press works for the executive committee, that the staff of the executive committee had mistreated this abuser, this survivor, and when they became aware of it, did not rectify their mistake.
That was 2019.
That's 2019.
And so, what came of that?
So they eventually retracted the article, and actually the staff they made a change in staff after that. Okay. So someone is held accountable. Someone's held accountable.
Okay. So
I think what. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think what's happened here is some of this, it's behind the scenes. Not everyone knows about it. It really became more. It became more public when Russell Moore left, and some letters that he wrote came out about with accusations that the SBC executive committee staff had mistreated survivors and downplayed abuse. So those came up, I think. Go ahead.
So my question is this: what exactly, if you're saying that those things were handled in 2019 and those things came out of it, what exactly is being asked now in 2021? Is there stuff on top of on top of things of 2019? Has something happened since 2019 that for 2021 Ed Litton is doing seems like the same thing that J.D. Greer did in 2019, right? So
that's a good question. Yeah. So here's what I would say. This is my understanding. Yeah. So one is the church in Georgia, where they found more abusers. The news that they found more abusers came out during the SBC convention. Okay. So that situation.
And that's documented.
So that's documented.
So we don't need an investigation for that. We don't need an investigation for that, right?
So what I'd say is this, and this is actually the messengers decided this. So I think what happened is that if I could summarize it, I think this is what happened.
Okay.
So we have this 2019 situation We have a lot going on behind the scenes. We have a lot of uproar with Dr. Moore leaving, with allegations that there is that abuse survivors have been mistreated or that abuse allegations have been mishandled.
Yeah.
And I think what the ministers wanted to know was, is there substance to this? That the messenger should know. How did the executive committee do something wrong? And it's still wrong and should be fixed.
But Bob, here's my question though: are we talking about something other than what's documented already? Is there something new apart from what's already documented that they're looking into, or are we revisiting? Go ahead.
No, that's a good question. I think that's what's going to be resolved in this review.
Because here's the problem, though. Here's the problem that I do have. Is this? I mean, they announced the task force. Bruce Frank, pastor of Beltmore Baptist Church in Oregon. And you got a list of people, right? You got all these people. My question is, what are they investigating? What exactly are they looking into? Or is this a committee, a lynch mob committee, trying to look for something that they don't really know what they're looking for?
Yeah.
Listen, if there's legitimate problems, got it. But what exactly are they tasked with? What are they looking at? What are they looking for?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding is, and this has to go back to the motion made. So let's go back to the convention.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is all going on. I think it reflects a couple things. One is, I think there is unhappiness in churches and the way that Southern Baptist leaders are acting, institutionally wise, right? So there's a big, as you know, there's questions about critical race theory, there's questions about abuse. There's a lot of questions about the public witness of the convention and how leaders have acted. So that's one part of what's going on here.
Okay.
I think there are two, the kind of departure of Dr. Moore brought up these questions. Have abuse survivors been mistreated? And has the executive committee acted in an appropriate manner? So those questions were raised up. And I think what happened is pastors in the convention, in this case, a pastor, Grant Gaines from Murfreesboro, and another pastor from North Carolina, said, wait, we're going to pick up a motion and say, you need to look into this.
Look into what, Bob? That's what.
No. All right. Just say to look at how the convention's leaders have handled abuse allegations and what their interaction with abuse survivors has been.
So here's my question.
And to say what's appropriate.
Here's my question. Sure. Which convention leaders? J.D. Greer, Ronnie Floyd, and what's the accusation? Which convention leaders are being questioned?
Sure. So it would be the executive committee staff and members, but primarily the executive committee staff, because the executive committee, as you know, is both the members of the committee and then the staff that work for the executive committee.
Gotcha. And who heads all of that?
Primarily. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
So there's no way you could do that and excuse Ronnie Floyd then. He has to be at the center of this.
No, I think Ronnie Floyd is one of the people there's questions about.
And if I'm not mistaken, someone asked him directly, right?
Yeah.
And his response was what?
What did he ask? I know he was asked. I know they have not. The committee has not said it would not stand in the way of this review.
Okay.
I think they're going to look at my understanding is they'll look at everything. They have got a wide.
Everything meaning what? That's what maybe I'm.
Sure. Sure. So I don't know exactly what, because the executive committee itself hired a group to review its action.
Yeah.
So that's why. So.
Okay, Bob, do you see my concern? Which actions are we actually looking at? You know what I'm saying?
Sure. So this is So what the messengers, because I think it's worth going back to that.
Mm-hmm.
The messengers there's a motion at the committee, and the messengers gave them a mandate. Basically, the mandate was, shoot, I can read it because I have it in front. I got a motion in front of me. I should have the motion in front of me.
Bob, and I'm not attacking you, Bob. It's not your fault. I'm not attacking you. Because I'm asking.
So they make a motion. They say,
Go ahead.
So I'll tell you. So here's what the messengers have tasked the task force we're doing. Because I think it's worth saying that. They shall ensure that a third-party review includes an investigation into any allegations of abuse, mishandling of abuse, mistreatment of victims, a pattern of intimidation of victims or advocates, or resistance to sexual abuse reform. So that's what they're going to look at.
I hear you, but even in that, and let me say this, I understand the messengers may have done that, but I was at the convention, and I think the messengers, if you take it at face value, the messengers were wrong in several things that they did. Here's that's the majority of them. So here's, again, my question is, if the messengers formed a committee or gave a mandate to go and investigate all forms of abuse, well, what does that mean? I mean, are you has a task force been formed to go look at every abuse in every Southern Baptist church in America? Of course not. They can't do that.
Yes.
What I'm saying is, if you're going to set something up like this, because here's the problem, Bob. If you set up a committee to do something and they have to generate or make up something to justify their existence, some people may get hurt, right? I mean, if you're going to do something like this, it seems you have to have some specific allegations that you're going to look into. Otherwise, you're creating a task force that's going to do feel-good stuff and do nothing. And I'm thinking, why is this task force necessary when you had one 2 years ago? Or they're going to go along and start investigating people, which at some point will be unbiblical, Bob. Because it says, as an elder, you only accept an allegation by 2 or 3 witnesses. All right. So if a pastor's at a church and one person says something, you got to have 2 witnesses in order to bring that elder in. Right. And so is the task force going to be restrained from the scriptures when they're investigating allegations? And that's what I'm saying. This task force, I don't understand what they're being asked to do, because this could be a monster and this could be very dangerous and it could be unbiblical. I'll give you the last word, Bob. We're a little long here. Go ahead.
Sure. No, these are really good. I think there's lots of good questions here. I think so. If we go back to it, I think there's concern on the part of churches and pastors on what exactly is going on with the executive committee. And the executive committee itself decided we should have someone review our actions. And what I think happened was the committee itself said, there's questions. We'll set up a review. We'll hire this group called Guidepost Solutions that they hired to conduct a review.
Bob,
and I think...
Bob, this is crazy. I mean, on face value, this is crazy. If I'm part of the executive committee, what allegations are you guys saying that we did wrong? Let's handle it right now. We don't have to call an investigation. We don't have to put together anything. What exactly did we do that was wrong? And be honest and forthright. What exactly did we do wrong? We'll answer any questions right now. Why would I hire and a committee to come along and investigate my actions? Why don't you just be forthright and honest with what you did? Why do I need to hire somebody to come in? What exactly are we talking about? Because if they actually are guilty of something, then hiring this task force is nothing but it's a game. It's a game. What exactly did you say we did wrong? Right? If the executive committee is saying they did something wrong, please tell me, what did we do wrong? What actions do you want us to investigate? Do you see what I'm saying, Bob? I just...
No. I see what you're saying. So this is where I'm the reporter, kind of reporting back.
No, I got you. I got you. It's not you. It's not you. If I'm understanding it right.
Those are good questions. These are good questions. I think. Yeah. I think a couple questions would be. Yeah. One, I think there's there's concern about what exactly happened here, and I think that's a fair question from the messengers to say, wait, we don't think something's going wrong here. And I think what they said, the executive committee's response to that uncertainty was, well, we'll hire someone to look at our processes, because it does help. Lots of institutions do this because you can't see, if you're inside the institution, one, you're not the best person to look at your own actions, and you have a vested interest in saying we didn't do anything wrong.
Which means you're dishonest.
So I think, yeah. So I think that once the committee said, "Oh, we're going to hire someone else to do this," the messenger's response was, "If we're going to have someone, you've already made a decision. We're going to have someone look at the executive committee. Then the messengers should be in charge of who gets to set the parameters of that review and evaluates the response to the review." So if you had the committee doing it, is the committee hiring someone to look at their own actions and decide what to do with it, So they would set all the parameters. And so the messengers have said, okay, since you think if the executive committee thinks that it needs to be a review, we are going to be in charge of that review, and we're going to appoint some people to set the parameters and evaluate the response. Does that make sense? So I think that.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
So there's another. These are good questions, and I think the questions actually for Southern Baptist. I'm not the Southern Baptist. I'm a reporter, but I think the questions you're asking are the questions that should be asked of the task force. What are you going to look at? What's the parameters? And how are you going to decide that?
And what are we investigating? What exactly did the executive committee do that we're going to investigate? This sounds like Congress to me. This sounds like politicians that's hiding behind processes. Or if we had an honest man to say, what are the allegations, and bring those people to whom the allegations are being made into a room, and let's hash this out honestly. But that's just me. That's just me. That's just me.
Yeah. No. These are. I mean, this is the so churches in general are both human and spiritual institutions, and the human, as a reporter who's reported on a lot of human institutions have a very difficult time in admitting if they've done something wrong.
Then they're dishonest. Then
saying
their pride and dishonest,
and then saying and then evaluating whether they've done a good job or not. I mean,
all 80-something of them though. Is there not one honest person on the executive committee to take charge? What about the president of the Southern Baptist? What about Ronnie Floyd and his staff? I mean, what you're talking, what's being described here is a rotting of an institution, of a group of people who can't even figure out what they did wrong and how to solve. But anyway, that's it. Bob, we've run a little long. Hey, Bob, I've got to have you back. I've got to have you back, Bob.
Yeah, those are great. Those are good questions. I think that these are the questions that will. I think these are the questions that the messengers at that meeting, given the space and time they had, said, if we're going to have a review, we're going to be in charge of it.
Which means I don't trust. The people to do it. They're not honest enough to do it on their own. That's what they're saying, right? So I got it. All right, hey, Bob. Hey, thank you so much. We got to have you back, Bob, because again, I don't have time.
Yeah, and we should talk again soon.
Yeah, let's talk again soon, because I don't have all of the. I don't have time to do the reporting that you do. But this was great, Bob. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you, people.
Have a great day.
You too, Bob. Stay on the line before you go. Thank you for listening for such a time as this. We will be back definitely with Bob's to talk more about this. Thank you very much, and thank you for looking at For Such a Time as This.
For such a time as this.